now the business community is very aware that we must have childcare, but Katie, you were one of the first folks that I met with, and you've been very consistent in that work. So thank you, thank you, thank you. What we did in childcare, that $100 million was truly a drop in the bucket. And I just came from tours in Wallowa County on Friday, and wasn't really a tour, it was the Pendleton Roundup a couple weeks before that. I just know that while childcare may be challenging in metropolitan Oregon, it is incredibly challenging for our communities in rural Oregon. So we have a lot more work to do there. The creation of DELC, and Alyssa, you've done, frankly, an extraordinary job, both systems transformation and creating a new agency all at the same time. Your work, your team, you all have just been phenomenal. So thank you. Well, and thank you. I suspect there was a few hours of education, training, hand holding, and shoulder providing for crying. So thank you, Cole. Really appreciate that. I'm really excited about the work we're doing around universal home visiting. Again, all of the wraparound services, you all know this is so instrumental, but home visiting, really cool. The investments in ECSE, so important. I received a teddy bear from Angela probably 20 years ago. She has a child with Down syndrome and was advocating 20 years ago for more significant investments in early childhood education, particularly kids with special needs. And I still have that teddy bear, and I don't think Angela's advocating anymore, but at least systems wide. But I'm really pleased that we were able to make significant investments there. I would like to talk about sort of my concerns moving forward, if I may, and be fairly upfront and blunt with all of you. So my concern is that I feel like both the legislature and the business community is losing their focus around early childhood education and our efforts to create a continuous system, literally from birth to kindergarten. I know that next legislative session is likely to be more challenging financially than we've had in a couple of years. I anticipate, well, I know you'll have 41 out of 90 new legislators, and most of them have never, ever served during a recession. So this is going to be really challenging for both the budget and the ability to encourage them to stay focused. My concern, if we lose our focus now, some of you might remember 2001 to 2003. Peter, were you even in the legislature then?
It's almost there.
Almost there. You were still a legislative baby. Governor Kitzhaber had a bill. It was the triple nickel, Senate Bill 555, and it made significant investments in early childhood education. We passed that in 1999. It was bipartisan. Senator Charles Starr carried that bill on the Senate floor. It was really an extraordinary moment. And then when the recession hit in 2001, 2003, we literally wiped out all of those investments. I'm not worried about that scenario. I'm just worried that we don't continue to invest. And we still have, Alyssa, and you all know the numbers, we still have a lot of families that need the services and of early childhood education and wraparound services. I'm just worried that we fail to invest, and we have to keep up our momentum. We absolutely must. I'm also concerned, less so frankly, because I think the legislature is very committed. Oregon, the Early Learning Council, the early childhood advocates have done a really good job keeping a focus on equity, on making sure that our historically underserved communities are at the center of our work. I don't anticipate that the legislature will lose that focus, but I think there will be a lot of competing needs. And for me, it's about really centering these voices. And that is also making sure that there is systems transformation at the same time. So I just I say that, I put that out there. And then the last piece is a sense of urgency. I had the opportunity to meet with tribal leaders last week. The investments we make today will impact the next several generations. And we just have to continue to move forward on this work. So that's why I'm so grateful to all of you. I am so appreciative of the Early Learning Council, your vision, your holding state agency lands feet to the fire in terms of implementation. I think it's absolutely essential if we really want to build a just and equitable Oregon, that we continue our focus on investing in, I'll say prenatal through K. We know that our investments pay off. We knew this in the 90s. I remember the RAND studies from then when I sat on the Judiciary Committee, and we talked about if we make investments in early childhood education, guess what? We won't have to make the same investments in our prison system. I will just share that today we have as many prison people in our prison system as Washington State. They have almost double the population. They're at 7.8, we're at 4.3 probably. They have the same number of people behind bars as we do. So your work will make an incredible difference in the lives of children and families. Your work will help us, I think, root out and stamp out the equity gaps that we're seeing in our communities of color, our children with different abilities, our rural communities, and our families with low income. So I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm very excited to see what Raise Up Oregon does the next 5 years. I'll probably be screaming and yelling from the sidelines, but pretty excited to see that vision and that vision be implemented. So thank you all. It's been an honor and a delight.
Thank you. Well, we've had, some of us have spent the morning talking about the current Raise Up Oregon and what we're hoping to see different in the future. And I just want to say one of the real values of this council is, as I see it, is that the agency directors are very engaged. They show up at our meetings. They always
Yay!
It is yay, and it's yay Nicole and Andrea, our newest agency director. But it's that exchange and interchange that has really, I think, galvanized a lot of the work that we're doing. And one of the things that I heard as we walked around to the 6 different sectors this morning was, okay, so we've got a lot of communication going on at the statewide policy level. How are we all going to now work to coordinate the on-the-ground delivery systems? And I think that will be certainly a part of our focus in the next hour and a half while we have our agency partners with us, is saying, how can we really make sure this is manifested so that families and children benefit from this work? There are a lot of resources out there. I keep hearing that and seeing that, but we need to make sure that we're deploying them as efficiently as we can.
Absolutely, and I think there's a lot of partners. For example, Khalid Ladd, Children's Institute. I think there are a lot of really eloquent voices out there, and I think partnerships both with our nonprofit organizations as well as our amazing agency directors will help that effort continue. And I also want to say, Anne, I just saw the numbers group, the book.
Oregon by the numbers.
Yes. Our pre-kindergarten readiness is not that great.
No.
And Wallowa County is like knocking it out of the ballpark. They're doing the very best. But we're mostly at about 50%, and we could be doing a lot better to make sure that our kids are ready for kindergarten.
So we have the governor for another 8 minutes.
I might be able to give you 9, Madam Chair.
I know your I can imagine your schedule. So other comments from council members? Thoughts you'd like to leave with the governor? Takeaways?
You're so shy.
I usually jump in because nobody else does. I'm first to say that you've been the best governor for the child in my system. Really appreciate that. And I just think that the word, I echo what Sue said about having the agencies on the council. As I'm doing my work, I have to continue to just assure people that no, they are talking with one voice. Hopefield does understand what DHS is doing. DHS does understand what OH is. So it's that needs to kind of get out into the community. We need to keep that momentum going. We need to understand it. And I appreciate all the agencies who talk about more community engagement. And my hope is that we coordinate that community engagement. That we don't, there's only so many community members to go around. And so we can coordinate that well going forward, so that we're making the most of the times we have in Medford or in Hood River, where we gather people together to give feedback, etc. So it's to comment on that.
Yeah, Katie.
Also, thank you, Governor. You really done a leader in this issue. There's one thing you can look at, and there's many, but this is so important. So I thank you. So my question or my observation is reading paper today about the continuity of risk focus in the next administration. What can we do as an early learning council, pieces of legislation that you're flagging that are already in the formative stage for the 24th session? How can we be most useful in continuing this work?
Well, not only are you losing, or there will be a different governor there. You've lost, or we are losing Rep Power and Rep Zika.
Yeah.
And first of all, both of them totally understood the impacts of the importance of early childhood, both from their own lives, but from their communities. And I think it's incredibly important that we recruit, whatever the word is, the next champions. And I, off the top of my head, I don't know who those folks are, but I would be very thoughtful about that. I think, and I would make it more than 2 people, because as you know, the Oregon legislative process is somewhat always in transition, and it would be good to have 4 or 6 than 2. And those 2 were absolutely amazing, but 4 and 6 would be much better. So there are a lot of younger legislators coming in. They may not have the time and energy, ironically, for this particular issue, but I would obviously look to some of those folks. But I also think you're going to have to take some of the elders in the legislature as well. And I'd create a very small group of people that is willing to be your champions and the champions for creating a seamless system of education from I would say pre-birth to kindergarten. So the other thing in terms of budget, we can certainly incorporate a number of things into the agency recommended budget. And so we will do that to the extent possible. The next governor will have the ability to create her own budget, but it'll be it's a cake that's mostly baked. It'll probably be more like frosting on the cake as opposed to, starting all over. So to the extent that we can incorporate any sort of forward proposals into both DELC and Department of Ed and other budgets, DHS, OHA, that's incredibly important. So, and the same is true with policies. They all, I assume, have some key statutory changes they would like to make, and we should get those drafted and ready to go. And then I mentioned earlier, outside partners. The reason why I raised Kali's name is because I've seen her voice now very strongly in a couple of places, the Business Oregon magazine and the Childhood Center being built in Pendleton, and then probably regarding the gubernatorial debate and the lack of a conversation about childcare. So I think our partners are incredibly important, and we can't lose the business community in this effort. So, and honestly, employers, 3 things, right? A house, job for a spouse, which is not an issue right now, and childcare. And if we had affordable quality daycare in every community around the state, employers would not be facing the challenges they're facing.
The childcare deserts are hurting everyone.
Yep.
That's for sure. Well, one of the things we were celebrating this morning with Pat and staff, and all of OHA, Kate, was the waiver. Yeah. And we know that's gonna have, it's not really trickle down, it's trickle out or whatever, impact on all of us. And we just see real ways to partner on the implementation and really taking advantage of what that can do with our target population and making sure we're good partners in that implementation. And the other thing I want to point out was on the phone is the co-location.
Yes.
Housing, the childcare and housing, which could, solve some housing issues for families and childcare. And we're just really excited that that partnership is really coming together now. So Andrea and Mitch, we appreciate your partnership as well. It's been great. So lots of things to celebrate.
Well, Housing and Community Services is knocking out of the ballpark in terms of permanent supportive housing and the ability to get more units on the ground than we had hoped. And so I think this sort of thinking about co-location and if you think about it, and I just think back to the families that I worked with, if everything was right there for them, what an incredible difference that would make. And in some communities, it doesn't always work, right? Wallowa County probably doesn't work, but for the Portland metropolitan area, for Marion County, there are so many, I assume for Southern Oregon, co-location is a wonderful model. And then the waiver, Pat and his team just did an outstanding, I'm just really, really excited about that. For us to have kids covered until they are 6 years old is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Yep. So, it is. Well done. Thank you. Well done.
Hey, any other comments for the government?
Governor Brown, I would just say thankful for all that you've done for K-12 education and early learning. We've thrived due to a lot of work that you've done. So, just locations and facilities. I think I bring that up often. It's great to have enrollment. It's great to have our pipeline, even in pathways and folks to be teachers. They need facilities. They need space. So anything that can be done to create facilities or space arrangements, whether it's co-location or whether it's school districts or whether it's just offices in general that can be used to expand the ability for students to be enrolled and to receive services, that would be great.
I think we're gonna have to be more flexible in our building spaces, right? With hybrid work and with the great need and probably the lack of adequate resources in terms of capital for construction. I think our ability to be flexible, I'm just thinking, I think it was in Baker actually, but it was was it an elementary school that's now the Baker Technical Institute?
I do know they created a space there.
It's
somehow
really
with a
cool. It's
bond
really cool.
project.
Why not include a daycare facility in it at the same time? So maybe it's already there. I don't know.
I don't think so.
They did create a Baker Early Learning Center with the bond that was done for their elementaries, and they created space within that, so they did a nice partnership.
It's really cool. It's really, really exciting. And I think of old buildings. I know my elementary school is now a senior living facility. So I just think we need to think about space as more flexible, more resilient in terms of climate change and obviously to meet different needs of the community. So and that's a particular challenge I know for communities in rural Oregon. Thank you for your leadership. I know it hasn't been easy. So thank you.
Likewise.
Likewise, right. And one final comment, because workforce is a common
Huge.
denominator among everybody at this table. And what we realize is that our council would benefit hugely from having a more direct tie to higher ed.
Mm. Great. So do you have an executive order that I can sign today?
I'll make it the
You do.
elevator.
Okay.
Then.
Okay. Well, I think, I don't know, Colt, this might not be, I'm just sort of throwing out the, Educator Advancement Council. Maybe it needs a early childhood education component, or maybe we need a whole new council. I don't know. I just put that on. Cause you don't have enough stuff to do. Just put that on your radar screen.
Oh, don't suggest, we're suggesting the EAC get ousted.
No, 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 no,
No,
no, no, no, no, no, no, yes.
We were thinking more of Ben Cannon.
Okay. Oh, got it. Okay. All right. Perfect.
Do we have a name card for him over there?
That is very funny. Well, that also kind of ties into the work around future ready work.
Yeah.
Right, the workforce development stuff. So, and we really need our early childhood workforce to reflect the diversity and experiences of our families. So.
Okay.
Thank you all. I would love to stay all afternoon. Angie, it's really great to see you. It's been a
Great to
while.
see you, and I do thank you so much for all of your work around early childhood, around equity, around tribal relations. I just wanted to say that real quickly. I know you're on your way out.
Thank you. So keep up with the good work, and I look forward to seeing the next 5 years on your Raise Up Oregon. So take care. Thank you. Okay, Zoom tomorrow.
See
Good.
you tomorrow.
It's nice to have a hybrid options. I do like in person though. So, all right, take care, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, Efren. Thank you. All right. Well, official welcome to our agency director partners who are with us. Thank you for joining us. Including Colt and Andrea, who are in back of me, but someone will key me in when you, or just speak up if you need to interrupt. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, thanks to Harriet and Carrie, we're going to have a conversation about where are we and where are we wanting to go? And it'll really build on what we all did for the last 4 hours here this morning. And then projecting right into the future, and obviously what you agency directors are thinking of, and part of it's in your recommended budgets, I'm sure, but we just want to know, what are your thoughts, where are you heading? And we all have thoughts that we want to give to you as well. And how can the council play a role in supporting their agendas? Just sort of always the bottom line we come back to. So with that, you're good?
Yep.
Yeah.
And did I not say what?
We forgot to, which one of us was gonna start.
Oh, okay,
I'm gonna start.
you're gonna start.
Okay.
Harriet.
All right, so welcome back, everyone, and Colt and Andrea, we'll try to, hopefully this will work for you too. Okay, hopefully our strategy will become clear and you can participate in via Zoom. So everyone who's here, or almost everyone who's here, spent a pretty intense morning together, in which we looked together at all of the different sectors supporting Raise Up Oregon. And we looked at different ideas about where we've been through the current plan. And we also looked at themes that had emerged from all that work with the organizations and additional inputs. So we have 3 big questions that we want to discuss with everyone during this part. And I'm going to start by going through what the 3 big questions are. And then we're going to explain what we hope is going to be a very good strategy so that we can get contributions from everyone in this room about these 3 big questions. And so the questions we have first, and let me preface this by saying, when we are going to ask you for your answer to these questions, we are going to be asking everyone who is here for their answer to each of these questions. And we are going to be asking you, instead of answering each of these with 10 things, to answer each of them with 1 thing. And if that is totally frustrating for you, you might answer them with 2 or 3 things. But this is trying to get all of us to focus. You all have stickies in front of you. And so before we start the big conversation in the group, what we are actually going to do after I tell you the 3 questions a few times, so you can remember them, is we're going to ask each of you to jot down for yourself what your response is. And then we're gonna try to go round robin around the room, so we all have an opportunity and get into a conversation. So the first question is the easiest. Thinking ahead about Raise Up Oregon and the next 5-year cycle that the plan will cover, what is most exciting to you? But it's not the 10 things that are most exciting to you, it's the one thing.
And you want us to write this on a sticky?
Yes,
And
for
we'll
yourself.
say it later.
Yes, we'll say it later. And I'm gonna read you the questions. Of course, if you already know, you can write down while I'm talking, but I'm gonna keep reading the questions and I'm gonna read them a couple of times. The second question, where you write a separate sticky for your answer is, this is getting harder. Thinking about Raise Up Oregon second edition, from where you sit, everyone in this room has a different role. We have agency directors, we have state agency staff, and of course, we have council. Each one of you is a contributor in a uniquely different way to this work. So this is thinking ahead from your role. What is the most important opportunity? That's why this is getting harder. This wasn't the 10 most important opportunities. This is one, and if that is really unbearable and you are paralyzed, then write down 2, maybe 3. Okay. The third question is also an area we've been talking about a lot today, and it created that 6th group, because we have 5 agencies, but we had a 6th thing, which was partnerships. Partnerships across agencies. So the last question is thinking ahead. What is an area of collaboration that you want to see across agencies? So let me go back through the questions. Okay, one more time, because I see people pondering. Question 1. Thinking ahead about our next edition of Raise Up Oregon, what is most exciting to you? Question 2. Thinking ahead about Raise Up Oregon second edition, the new one we haven't written yet. What is the most important opportunity? Third is thinking ahead. What is an area of collaboration that you would like to see across agencies? It does not have to be all 5 agencies. Okay, and collaboration is 2 agencies. It can be more, but 2. We had these written on the big screen thing, but now that we weren't realizing that both and Andrea were joining us, so we're happy you're here, but the questions are in back of them. Okay, should I read them one more time?
No.
Oh, David needs this.
David needs it again.
Yeah, it's okay. I can read them one more time because people are starting to write, and then we're gonna like wait 5 minutes anyhow, so people can write down.
Yeah, it was in our packets.
Yes, correct. Do people need the handout?
Yes.
We'll pass them around. Do we need more? These are the rest of the copies I have. So. In 5 minutes, we will come back together and we will do a round robin. So we're gonna ask people first to listen to each other and give everyone an opportunity to share. Okay, and so we'll just go around the table to do that. And then you'll do one answer at a time. You won't answer all 3 questions. We're gonna start with the first, have some focused conversation and so forth.
Definitely not one.
When that started, I want to go
Yeah, I'll collect. We're gonna collect all the stickies at the end. It's just part of our note taking process.
You're gonna need a wheelbarrow to buy.
They have sugar products now.
Oh, yeah, there's a cookie. thing.
Oh, good idea. Yeah,
So,
and is there coffee over there too, Remy?
you know what? I'm gonna go grind some fresh stuff. There's still some in the pot right now, but I'm gonna get more.
Okay.
I feel like that her, right?
Oh, did you turn Colton and Andrea off?
No, they turned them.
Oh, thank you. It was so hard to get them on in the first place, to not have to refine them. You're starting.
Yeah. I knew he was done, because he was already in the hallway making the calls.
So if you only want one, you shouldn't give people a ton of.
I'm
Yeah.
going to stop now. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do for the first question, round one. We're gonna go around the table. Peter has agreed, his voluntold that he's going to kick us off. And so in this round, we want you to listen to each other, obviously. And we are asking you to share your first answer, okay? So just question one. And if you answered multiples, the most you can share is 2 responses to the first question. Don't share more than 2, because we want to hear from everyone. And we want to get through all the questions, and we do want to have a little bit of time to have a discussion about how you all answer. Okay, so Peter, you can kick us off.
Sure, the excites me the most, the focus on social emotional learning and behavior health.
All right, mine is, I'm excited about the possibility of designing services collectively to best serve families.
Kind of similar, cross-sector integrated partnerships that increase the state's capacity for wraparound support for services to families.
I heard that. Pretty much align, services to co-locate and deliver multiple services together. Just count on what-
Oh, yeah, and we're all here together.
I said the opportunity to take our systems level thinking to community, so how are we putting our work, our strategies into action?
Okay.
I am also on that collective agency working together to provide services in a much more efficient manner.
We were answering, but I just on the fly, I will say, collaboration around that community involvement and family voice.
Colton and Andrea, can you hear people?
I can hear,
All right,
Okay.
so we speak
Well,
up if you're back there so they can hear who's,
I'll reject as well as I can.
thank you.
I also on the fly, think our tribal partnerships, expanding those, and really figuring out how we can connect better with other communities, but all in this is partnership.
I said having actual collective vision and shared strategic plans and an agency perspective can't be underestimated in terms of how we can align resources and actually move on some of the work is really important.
I'll add the potential for bridging pre-K programs around early literacy.
So I'm on this crew over here, using lessons learned from version 1, setting up local collaborations for success.
At first I thought I was going to be led in this response, but I actually think I'm being sincere. We're not starting from scratch. It's developing the second edition in the sense that I think, the work over the last 4 years and also do this edition to have a go framework for these conversations.
We've been missing out, I guess.
Yeah. Pick him up when he gets back. Go ahead, Angie.
Okay, all right. I have a number of things down, but as more people talk, the more I think, and I do want to, I appreciate what you said about tribal relations, because I didn't think about that, but I'm really excited about the new Oregon Tribal Learning Alliance and just the opportunities for the tribes to work collectively with the state on early learning care. So this is on regulations.
Awesome, thank you. Sue, and we'll go back to you. What's your one?
Okay, I had to distill, what am I excited about in terms of being on the council? What am I excited about for this next revision? I'm excited that from community voice and the findings and the reporting that I was reading, that we're hearing people give concrete ideas and guidance around issues of race and racism, and that we as a council are hearing that, and it's up on the walls and in our reports and in our inboxes, and that helps me answer number 2, that's what I'm most excited to work on.
Similar themes, leveraging our lessons learned to develop a cross-sector plan that already has the buy-in at the agency level that can really drive achievable but transformational change across the state.
Well, I'm most excited about kind of boots on the ground with the universal home visiting and building trust with families.
I don't know, my answer has changed 3 times already. I would say coming together to speak with one voice to our communities and hear the same thing from them collectively.
I think mine is about thinking about maintaining the cultural change in this state and vision that this state values investments in children and keeping that front and center as we are a state that invests in children.
And I'm most excited about doing this work in a new administration, regardless of who the administration is or whether who's here or not here, particularly in a topic area that has not become highly politicized during the campaign, where we can bring our lots of answers and solutions and things to do that I think are the kinds of things that could be welcomed by anyone who's running.
Thank you, Pat. Andrea and Colt, we are hoping you made your own list and that you can share, because we promised Sue she would be last. So,
Got it.
So just question number 1 and your one thing in your answer to question number 1. Andrea, you were smiling the most first, so if you could kick us off, and then Colt will go to you.
Great. Smiling about the question, smiling about that there's, uh-oh.
I know it's wrong. I know it's wrong. Okay, Remy knows what's wrong. He's going to make it so you can go under the table.
Okay.
Tell we don't have our in-person meetings. You don't usually use a hole in the computer. All underneath that.
Andrea, I think we can hear you now. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
There we go. Perfect. We have to take the small wins. Yes. So yeah, just good afternoon. It's so good to see all of you. Wish I was ideally would be there in person. Yes, I was smiling, remember? Yes, because of just all of the community perspective, community collective that's there. Also, I can see the snack shuffling back and forth. And I have a really good angle of the snacks that are being pursued, which is always a good time. I have more than one answer, but I'll follow the rules here. So here's what has me the most excited. I think within this plan, it is it's a plan. So that's always good to have a plan. But I also think it charts out a very specific course of action that is seeking to address some of the very issues that have got us to this point of the challenges and the crisis that we're trying to untangle out of. So whether that is honoring sovereignty of our tribe, centering racial justice, those are some of the pieces that have created some of the very issues and problems that we're seeking to untangle ourselves out of. And being able to have a plan, a course of action that explicitly centers those very issues to make progress is one of many things that's exciting for me.
Thank you. Colt, you're up next.
Yeah, I think this leans in a little bit to what Pat said and really what the governor said earlier. So I'm excited about this, but I also think it's incredibly critical because we will have a lot of pressures to move on to new ideas and other ideas with changes in the legislature and the makeup of the leadership there. And even the alignment of some of the key partners. So we've had K-12 as a key partner, recognizing that early learning is critical to K-12 success. And while we still have George as a leader on that front, we've lost some of our other key leaders to retirement in other places. So the Don Groddings, Mary Alice Russells, John Petersons, those kinds of folks really moved the K-12 community to be strong early learning supporters. And as we go into a session that is going to be tighter on the financial side of things, it's really critical that we keep those partners together. We can also lean into the Secretary of State's risk report that talks about what happens in Oregon when we move from program to program and don't stick with them. So there's a lot of opportunity in the Student Success Act that brings K-12 and early learning together. And I think that's what gets me most excited, is to help everyone understand what all that piece of legislation does for us and help us stick to the promise of it that it brought.
Thank you, Colt. So Sue, you got the last answer.
Well, I had to come up with one no one else has said, so not easy. So, defining the role of the early learning hubs. We just have to figure that out. That's short. That's not 2020.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So I can see you had a lot of things written down that you crossed out because other people said them. Okay.
All right.
All right. So what we were thinking now, and we appreciate everybody's cooperation with this, that we would take a few minutes just to hear from people about your reflections on what you and your colleagues just shared. And we're not going to spend a super long amount of time on that, because we're going to get a little more granular, right, in those other questions. And we want to make sure we have time to do the same thing and have a little bit deeper, but we do want to open it up in case there are people who want to share basically your reflections from what you've heard.
I particularly like hearing what Pat had to say, and then Colt as well, just on it's kind of cool to keep supporting early learning, that not a lot of people have a lot of negative politics towards that, probably even towards housing. And I think when people hear that there's funding or infrastructure for early learning or for housing, those types of things, and then the role of the hubs, and just a little more accountability or a little bit more anything, just to me would be of interest as well.
Thank you, George, for kicking us off. Anyone else want to weigh in? And I just want to say one more time, the whole room is invited to share. Agency directors who do have more limited time with us, but are respecting they're here with the group, you know, so council members as well as RUIAC staff.
There's a lot to be excited about. You know, nobody seemed to have any trouble coming up with things to say. If I were sitting in a room like this and we were talking about behavioral health, what are you most excited about? So I think that's a really good sign that there's just a ton to be enthused about.
I thought it was great that a lot of the agency people thought that collaboration was really exciting, because I think that really opens the door to people working together.
Okay, maybe that's an excellent transition, okay, Peg, into our next section. Because that was a big theme. I tried to begin to quantify a little bit. And I think that was the single most talked about thing from the group, was the idea not just to have a common vision and a plan, but a shared plan across agencies, and that the plan might require more different, right from where people have been in terms of work together to build on that. So I think that's a great transition. So let's move to question number 2. And for question number 2, I'll, to remind people, this is what is the most important opportunity. We're trying to get more granular now for our second edition. And I didn't tap anyone like I got to Peter in the hallway for question number 1. So let me just ask that maybe we'll start at the other end for this time. So Colt and Andrea, that means you'll kick us off. Okay, Colt, it actually is you, because we still are gonna let Sue go last, since she is the chair. And then I'm just going to arbitrarily suggest that when we get to question number 3, okay, Angie, that you kick it off. All right, and we'll go from you that way around the room. Is that okay? Just so you can be prepared now. Okay. Is that good? So question 2, and again, we're in the same place we were. We are trying to get you to focus on one thing. This is harder, so we will understand now if you had 2 things, put them both out there for question number 2. And then a friendly just reminder as we go around the room, because we want Colt and Andrea to be able to hear, is people sitting further away need to project, okay, so that they can actually hear what they're saying. All right, Colt.
Yes, so I really quickly wanted to jump in on that last conversation. I tried to, but it's hard to do remotely. I just really appreciated what Sue talked about in the early learning hubs, because those are localized versions of who's around this table, with early learning supporters, healthcare, human services, K-12, housing. They're all sitting there as excited as we are and looking for direction. So I just think that's really a great area to be excited. For the second one, the opportunity related to my role that I see as most important is the work that will unfold over the next couple of years around early literacy, and making sure that that's closely connected to early learning and helping people understand that early literacy and early learning does not mean teaching children how to read when they're 3. But that there are really critical partnerships and components that we need to cross over with one another.
Thank you, Paul.
Yep. So I think for me, so obviously we talked a little bit about the care, the co-location, affordable housing. I think from my seat, what I'm probably the most excited about and where I think the most opportunity sits is within the plan. We have a lot of goals, aspirations, and I think that's a wonderful thing. And we're talking about trying to facilitate generational impact. What I'm interested in knowing is where do we need to do business differently? Not just here and now for the next year. Where do the operations of businesses need to change to meet the aspirations from a very tactical and granular detailed component? Because what I want is, if I'm not here as the agency director, I would still fully want and expect that OHCS would be at the table, that housing would be part of the conversation, because we know too many families and children have to move multiple times throughout the year. And so what I'm interested in knowing, what's the moonshot of where our business needs to change on a governmental level to facilitate systemic and sustainable comprehensive change for our young ones.
Thank you. Okay, Pat.
So I honestly, I could have put this answer down for all 3 questions, but it's the Medicaid waiver. And what I think about in that context is the continuous coverage for kids to age 6. And you think of coverage sometimes sort of in a vacuum, but as a means to an end. And that end is connection to $1 billion of health-related social needs spending. It's to hundreds of millions of dollars of spending by coordinated care organizations on social determinants of health and other things. And while this isn't hardcore directly early learning, it's all the supports that make that necessary. And one of the groups, we talked about the fact that the best way to herd cats is with a dish of milk. And I think there's a huge dish of milk associated with that waiver.
It's a creamer.
Right. You can go too far down that.
Well, I think I interpreted the questions differently because my thing about opportunity was what other people said is the most exciting thing. But I just think that the opportunity of collaboration on the ground. So the desire at the state agency level needs to really play out on the ground. And that's the opportunity there. And I totally agree with Sue that the hubs are an example of something that really needs attention.
I think the greatest opportunity is to break down the silos that have not allowed us to work together and see the whole picture. We can talk about early learning as much as we want, but without the families having adequate having jobs that actually have living wages, having transportation, having childcare naturally part of this. So I think that is our biggest barrier. And to do that, we have to share data. We have not been willing to do that. If we don't share data, we don't have what we need to identify the common population that bounces back and forth between our systems.
Yep.
From my perspective, the most important opportunity is similar to what Pat said. I think the waiver and having health stability for kids from birth through age 6 and have the opportunity for all those kids to have screening, appropriate immunizations, have a stable place where they can get their health care will help us, particularly with the social emotional development in children, to identify problems early, give a trusted relationship where we can address those problems.
Really good what said. Now that we've seen what's achievable, and we have checked off a lot in ways of burden, really being bold and considering what's needed before we think about what's possible, but what do we really need to do at an agency level to really.
I think there's a lot of opportunity around building behavioral health supports for children birth to 5, and not just the child, but the teachers and the caregivers that care for them and the parents that are raising them. I see a lot of opportunity there. There's also a lot of need. So this could have been like Ann said earlier, it could be what I'm excited about. These kind of are interchangeable. So, behavioral health, social emotional development.
I'm most excited about the opportunities we have with our workforce. And I feel it's a common issue across all the sectors that we're talking about. And I think in times like this, when things get really difficult and challenging, we're open to kind of just shake things up. It makes us a little bit more open to new, novel, unique ideas. And especially in the spirit of my previous comment around addressing issues of race and racism and making sure our workforce is inclusive. I see lots of opportunity to get really granular and specific in creating objectives and indicators that actually change the material conditions of people's lives.
So, right, reflecting a little bit. So I really didn't think about conversations we've been having around multi-sector, multi-agency partnerships. This is a real opportunity revision of race work and to be quite concrete about what those are, who's involved, and what their goals are. Think about sort of the first edition. When it first came out, every agency was asked to put a dot next to every strategy from 1 to 4, 1 not a priority, 4 highest priority. And when we did the progress report, it was quite striking that where there were a couple agencies that put it as a priority, things happened. But when every agency put it as a 2 or even as a 3, less seemed to happen. So it also seems like the more concrete we are about what those partnerships, who's in those partnerships and what they're about, the more actually happens.
Kind of on a similar theme, I had the same answer actually for all three questions as well. I mean, using these lessons learned to really, from the first version, to set up local collaborations for success. So if that means defining what does success look like, what are the resources or the capacities that need to be brought there, how do we do the parallel process of what we're creating here at the local level so that we can really come together as a system.
The word that has been coming to mind the whole time has been around coherence, and I've just been thinking about how, you know, we compare together, how can we then set that up and build on what you said, but especially I think about really visual, so I keep thinking about like, how do we make like erase the line between K to birth the, you know, like it seems like right now there's like division on kind of erase that line, and same with when we think about our high school students in the workforce. And so how are we building right within high school, there's CTE programs and workforce development, our apprenticeship programs, so that we can help build bilingual pathways for our workforce to be diverse. So I'm just kind of excited about that, erasing those lines.
I'm gonna go with Subin on workforce, and I think some of our conversations that we had channeling Chelsea Holcomb, who's not with us here anymore, the behavioral health workforce in particular is something that everyone today has talked about touching in their sector in some way and then for it. Both for the child, the parent, the workforce providing care, the child care, I mean, it's just really across the board. And I think having some collective strategies and understanding and building in the trauma-informed expectations of our workforce across all our sectors is what make a difference.
Sorry, I missed out on the first question, but luckily this answer is extremely similar, if not the same, as some of my colleagues have mentioned. I'm also going to be talking about silos. And when I see the most important opportunity in Race and Oregon second edition, I think about all the community engagement reports that I read from across every single agency, all the agency leaders here. And you could put OHCS on the ODHS, you could have put like OHA on the ELT, like you could have, they are all interchangeable. Families are saying the same thing across every single community engagement report. And families don't see separate agencies, they see government. Community-based organizations don't see separate agencies. And we see each other as separate agencies, and we're all like saying the same thing over and over again. And I worry about burning out our community-based organizations and our families and our engagement. And I see this as the most important opportunity, is harnessing all of this energy that is around this table and actually collaborating. That way we can create a seamless engagement system so that all families feel heard and all families feel supported in our social safety net system.
Perfect. Thank you. I have one door to go through to give feedback, not being tapped multiple times, so I wasn't really gonna talk about that, but that was really good. I would say just concrete for me, was around these opportunities, building in these opportunities where you're creating funds and, the co-location opportunities for that, so that we're really, I think, able to serve families in at a local level in a way that works right for them. So
I think one of the most important opportunities we have, as Demi was talking about community voice and community listening session, is moving on from listening to action and accountability as state agencies and building trust by doing the accountability work.
Well, let me certainly took mine, and this would be for both my second and my third. I think the focus on deepening community engagement in a way that's transformational and not transactional, but is that we are all as state agencies a part of healing from community together is really important. Yes, for learning, because I think a lot of our agencies are tapping the same organizations in the same communities, and we're not always thinking about what that means for them to participate and to engage with us. So I'm also saying compensation is really, really important. And so I think we need to do better community engagement, compensating people for their lived experience and their expertise, because it matters. And nothing we do is gonna matter if we're not hearing from people who are experiencing like the most impact by housing cost burdens and childcare burdens, and folks are living it every single day. And so they are also experts in their experience, and we need to listen, we need to honor, and then we need to act. And be really clear about what it is we're gonna do, maybe what it is we will not do and why, and then creating space to everyone in, who can see everyone in. And I'll jump ahead and say, like, that's where I see us really deepening work together as a team. So I'll say it again in the third round.
Same thing. Reverse. I think it would be great to.
Katie, will you speak up?
Sure.
Everyone hears. Thank
So
you.
I think this as an Apple experience, right? You get your AirPods, and you open up your box. Problem, no, but you open up your box, you pull them out, and all of a sudden they're connected to your phone. And your phone is connected to something else. It's completely a seamless experience. And I know we're not that as a state agency. I have on this issue. But I'm saying every time we pass a new rule, every time there's a new requirement for a provider who's putting up an obstacle, a good one for a good reason, but it's still an obstacle from a provider's standpoint. From a family standpoint, I know many folks with kids with special needs, for example, all know this. And it takes them days to make so many phone calls to get what they need. Can we make the Apple experience for providers and for families where you pick up the phone or open up the box and here's all this stuff that's plugged into each other already. You don't even have to worry about it. Somebody else did for you. I think that would help a lot. It would give them access to what they need more quickly. I think it would save on energy here, and it would be the manifestation of all this collaboration we're talking about. What does the user experience look like?
I think I'll say it in a different way. I had two that I wrote down. One was stable and consistent housing, health and education services. And the other one was just pathway pipeline development, building a strong workforce.
It's kind of an inside the baseball one that gets a little bit to what Katie was talking about, but I think an opportunity is to have the Department of Administrative Services at this table. Because I would love the question from. I didn't know they'd get out on that. I'd love for the question for DAS fiscal analysts to be, how are you collaborating as opposed to why are you collaborating? And I think there's a lack of understanding at DAS with how government actually works and what community wants from government. And I think they have to have a seat at tables like this to hear these sorts of conversations. Fair Horse is tired here.
Just gonna say they know exactly how government.
How we want government to do.
So for me, I'm just thinking the biggest challenge and opportunity we have, I think there's a documentary called In Utero. I don't know if you've seen that documentary. It's incredible. And it makes a really impressive case. In fact, the doctor, Gabor Mata, who's quoted in the movie, says if he could have full resources for a family, everything they needed for either the third trimester in the first 3 months of life, or everything in the first 3 months of life until the child's 21, what would he choose? You say the third trimester in the first 3 months of life. Because that connection is made, a healthy attachment is made. So much of the other things that we're doing, we're in response to that connection not being made, and the mother struggling in the third trimester in the first 3 months of life. So we have an opportunity with the home visiting programs, the pregnancy support and the home visiting programs that I think we really need to take seriously and really make progress on.
Wow, you guys are awesome. I guess I'm thinking about the getting upstream. and, you know, the prevention end of our work. And really wanting us to look at the social determinants of health, which we all know and we talk about all the time. But how can we try to add some momentum to addressing those and figuring out how do we get upstream and try to keep kids out of their horses, lose those systems. No offense. So that's I think an opportunity, but it'll take a lot of coordination among all of our partners.
So we made it around the group, and now is a chance to reflect on what you heard your colleagues say. And do you have observations or reflections now that you heard the range of opportunities that folks shared?
You know, I actually was going to bring, and this is not a commercial for Providence, so just put that on the table. But it's been fascinating, kind of going back to what Katie shared here about the role of government and how we approach service. We all talk about customer service, but we never approach the people who are being served collectively as customers. So, you know, we have different choices to choose different healthcare providers, and they're all competing right now because it's open enrollment coming up. You know, I'm getting all the, you know, we're the best because we can do this and this for you. And then, of course, you know, my insurance is Providence. So I got this little booklet from them that explains everything in detail and says, by the way, here's a navigator that can help you. If you can't figure all this stuff out, and you know, we've had great success with the tribes around the tribal navigator program that they asked us, we're tired of navigating your systems, so give us someone that can help us with that. So as we talk about this early learning, I think really, and you know, we are most violators of this as well, because if you read the notices that we send to people, sometimes our own employees can't decipher those. So a simpler way of connecting to people and helping them navigate through the systems. That's.
I was in Eastern Oregon earlier last week, and my favorite time at conferences is in between sessions where I get to go and talk to people and meet people. And I was asking them, I was telling people, oh, I might be doing this early learning council thing. You know, what do you think? It sounds very exciting. And they said, oh, what's that? Is that Oro? Is that is that licensing? Oh, that's a part of it. And I think it just speaks to what everyone is saying here is that when people are interacting with the system, it's all one big thing to them. And those are the components of the system that they're interacting with the most. And so from a user-centered, human-centered point of view, however we want to talk about it, I think as we're devising and creating a plan, it's important for us to continuously talk to people in a way that's respectful and honoring and making sure that we're actually reflecting people's voices in the plan. And I think the other thing I would add to that is whose voices would we center, right? Because we're going to be in a situation where we have competing interests or priorities, and whose voices would we center. I think that's the question for us to grab.
I think to keep going down the Apple metaphor, Apple iterates, right? And so I think you've talked a lot about listening, and when you talk to community, they've said, we've been talking to you, what have you actually done? And so I think the taking away from the energy and alignment in this group and start to do things differently, so that people start to really see change in what they're experiencing.
I would just add on to the Bears and Susan and nice, Lisa said too,
Peter, will you talk to?
sorry.
Thank you.
Our early learning hub did a survey, and it was like 324 families responded. And the kind of big takeaway was families don't care. They don't care who's providing the service. They don't care where you're from. They just need that what they need. And they need to be simple, like you were saying, because they know it is too complex. It just irritates the hell out of them. But they also said quite consistently, many families said they weren't treated with respect in the system. And that's something we can all do a better job at. It's just that simple thing, treating people with respect.
I guess, so one cautionary note about the Apple idea is the same people who are impressed when you open the box and it's connected also observe that they were talking with their spouse about needing to board their dog and have dog boarding ads showing up on all of their web pages, right? And how's that happening? And I, are things listening in on me? And so, I think we've got lots of work that we can do to make things work like the earbuds, but they don't work like the earbuds for some reasons that are real. And I think we also have to be aware of those when we're trying to do that work.
Pat, let me just say, because I was thinking about this, that I'm listening for different concepts, and so a big one that you're all talking about is points of connection. And one theme was actually coming together across agencies to listen collectively to what families and providers want, and maybe not doing that so much individualistically. Another theme was different strategies to make it more possible for families to make it easier to get what they wanted, not each agency, it's each tub on its own bottom, right? And then the other one that I think may relate to that big point that you were making is a little bit around, by the way, do we have enough of the services that people can actually get into what it is they needed or wanted? Right, because there are different things across these, and the other one might be, did we set up, and this is very challenging, did we set up artificial barriers that came from a good place? How my agency defines eligibility to enter, do you see different from another one that I think led you to the big brother listening thing, like when you get you want, but I think it could lead you in a different direction too. That's very hard. But if that part of the conversation around connection is also asking, what did we set forward that you had to prove to get the connection, right? So as I'm listening and trying to hear the many, this is just part of it, but the many ways people are iterating on this big theme is really connection that you're all making.
This whole thing sends me down the universal basic income path, but I'm probably socialist.
Can I add something really quickly? Sorry to hopefully I'm not cutting folks off, but I just wanted to add maybe two things. So one, I want to just reaffirm the last point that was mentioned about asking some critical questions of community, because I think, again, what we are seeking to do isn't going to, from my perspective, requires us working across the system to tend to it over time. We don't just do something and it's static and it's done and it's perfect. And the only way that government is going to tend to something is to ask some questions and be willing to shift with that. So we talk a lot about shifting power, and then we get constructive feedback, and it's hard to hear that feedback, and we have a whole litany of reasons on why something can't shift. If we want to actually shift power, we need to be willing to ask some questions, hear it, and shift and do something different. That is how transformation happens over time, and that is how it's sustained. You have to tend to it and care for it. The other piece that I would also say, and the governor alluded to this earlier and other folks have added to it, is, so in terms of the role of the council, there's a lot that's shifting in the political environment, but there's a lot that's not shifting. We know what the needs are, we know what the vulnerabilities and the gaps are, and those aren't shifting because of the political environment. And so I would just wonder, what is the role? How can we as a council sort of level up to find those advocates and to have coordinated advocacy strategies within this group? I'm sure there's many of us that would want to be able to play a more formative role in that. And so if we could figure out what that structurally looks like, what does that role look like? How do we take the energy, the kinetic that's in here in this room, and translate that into advocacy with our elected officials and building their competency so that we can have those champions beyond the couple that we have that may be fleeing and moving on.
Thanks, Andrea. Colt, do you have anything you want to add to this? Okay, thanks.
All right, let's move on to question 3, which was the question about what is an area of collaboration you see across agencies. And Angie, I believe you're going to kick us off, and then we'll move around the room.
Okay, I had 2 things on this list, and the first one was something that was covered deeply in the last question, and that was around the collective effort for family voice, for community input. and not burning out people because we're all separately out there asking them and trying to get their feedback. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration around that. And I was excited to hear so much conversation about that. The other thing that I think that I'm hopeful that there's areas, opportunities for collaboration is around workforce development innovations. So I see a lot of collaboration with K-12 education and higher ed, and particularly, I'm talking particularly about the PCE workforce, but this goes for everybody in the room, right? And I would just really like to see more collaboration around that.
Well, after the conversation, I would say the thing I'm most excited about is an engagement responsiveness strategy and how we divide that together. But when I wrote my post-it, I talked about workforce development and specifically bringing ODE, Delk, higher ed with when you were mentioned Van Cannon to the table. I think bringing higher ed to the table is something that early childhood advocates and practitioners have been trying to do for decades. So if we could meaningfully and substantially do something around that in early childhood, that would be so meaningful.
Sort of disappointed of the real opportunities moving forward.
David, please speak up.
Oh, sorry, I usually don't have that problem. It feels like one of the real opportunities we have, thinking of the next 5 years, is really around what we can all do to support the family preservation work that Cody gave us really great leadership on. We know that 0 to 5 population is overrepresented in the child welfare system, and just even thinking about sort of more narrowly from the perspective of the early learning division, Department of Early Learning Care, thinking about what role we can have and working more closely with child welfare and foster care, making sure there's access to child care, which we know is really important for helping stabilize families.
So for the third time, I will say, on collaboration, using the lessons learned from the first person, setting up local collaborations for success. And I think one of the things that we run into is when we're looking at local collaborations, one community may have a set of services that another one doesn't. And how do we support at the local level that consistency of no matter where you live and what region, you got the collaborative support at the local level and the services are there for you, rather than depending on your zip code where you may have services. So, but I think that takes a lot of work at that community level to identify those gaps, what families need, going back to what everyone's been saying.
And I'll just build off of that. I think about the defined collaboration a little more, not like I sometimes call it like the stumble upon collaboration that we have sometimes. You're like, oh, you did this? Oh my gosh, we gotta talk. And Steve and I connected on the SEL report work. And so just to really, I think the opportunity for this work to really be strategic and transparent about those, what are those collaboration opportunities in our agencies? And again, I think, like you said, I don't think people look out, they're looking at us like one big mothership. I don't know, like when I think it's gas, I think it's not like, that's why I like to new employees sometimes. But I even think about like navigators for state governments, like we're hiring a lot of new people. So how do you know, like people are leaving, and when that person leaves, how do you build sustainability in these collaboration spaces? That's
I would say the waiver is the one that really kind of jumps out at me here. I think we worked with most of your agencies in the process to build up until now. I think now switching it into implementation is going to be was a huge opportunity for us in terms of thinking about this cross-sector work that we've had for 5 years of working across agencies, and here we have funding and commitment and an opportunity to really see that unfold for real, like a required collaboration at the state and local level. And it will be hard. And so trying to think about how we do this creatively, how we ensure that we're supporting all the different agencies in this work is going to be really important. And I think, just the while the 0 to 6 is a big focus, I think that alone, will do so much for families when you think about the reduced impact of trying to navigate and figure out how to support your kid and get them to the doctor and are they covered and all that. That will have an impact on a parent's mental health. That will have all these other impacts that are rolling out that I think are going to be really important for us to understand.
I might be getting a little bit too granular with this answer, so forgive me in advance. I'm gonna do it anyway. We're talking about like all this engagement burnout, and I want to focus on our tribal nations partners with this answer for a second, because everyone here, every single agency has at least one tribal affairs coordinator at this point. And I don't know if any of them are talking to each other. I know that DHS has a tribal affairs committee where they meet quarterly. We have the tribal advisory council where we meet monthly. Like, how can we leverage off of each other's touch points with our tribal nations? Is it putting our tribal affairs coordinators on every single tribal committee and creating that cross-sector linkage that way? Or I would love to see like the tribal advisory committee in the early learning division, maybe they house the engagement with tribal families with 0 to 5. Maybe the ODHS does tribal families, like general families, like 21 below children. How can we kind of distribute the different engagement categories and opportunities? That way we reduce burnout with our tribal nations families, especially because it is a relatively small population and we don't need to all be separately going to the same people over and over again.
I was thinking about equity centered as sort of my final piece, and around, I think, access to data and that collaboration around that for being data driven and just trying to understand, I think, where disparities exist so that we can know where to sort of dive in deeper as we're doing this engagement and engagement. So to me, it's a little just
Well, for the second, same thing I said last time. I think, one thing I think I'm just reflecting on after today is that, prenatal to 5, early childhood education really is truly foundational for thriving communities. And so I'm also, I guess, maybe thinking about where is there, and not, because I oftentimes stay on the balcony, right? Sometimes it's hard for me to get into the weeds, so I like the balcony a lot. But where is there an opportunity? I think there's an opportunity for us collectively to clarify and or shift the narrative a little bit about what is required if as government, state government, staff, employees, council members, if we really care about communities thriving, what does it take? What have we heard from community that it takes for folks to really thrive? And then how do we all see ourselves reflected in the ability to make sure that communities thrive? So there's something there that I think there's a moment where we should all, from our vantage points, right? I know housing does something a little bit different, right, than early learning, but kids aren't able to engage if they don't have a home, right? So we're a part of that narrative, and so I just think that and I know, I get the privilege to hear Andrea talk all the time, but one of the things that I know that she has said that really resonates with me is it doesn't matter who's in office or not, the message has to be the same. And the message and the vantage point that that early childhood education is foundational, it's critical to making sure that ultimately communities thrive, that doesn't change. It doesn't matter who's in the Capitol. That doesn't change. And so our message doesn't have to change. And I don't think that community's voice in that changes, but it's always been the same. Lisa's point, like, we've been hearing that for a long time. Now we got to act on it. Got to act on it in strategy and policy, but to act on it and how we communicate about it. So engagement.
we still have a really severe childcare shortage in this state. And it's really fantastic work that we're all doing together. We need more childcare, period. We need to do everything that we can to figure out what are the obstacles, what is needed to get more. We're still behind and worse than before, but still, I think. Maybe we found out by now, but that's what I would like to do, is just double down on, let's get them out there, let's figure out how to do it, and we have the workforce to do it.
I'm pretty close to 80 again. I put in here infrastructure development. At the end of the day, you know, whether it's pathway programs, facilities, you need both. You're going to increase capacity for students, you gotta have staff. If you're gonna increase capacity for students, you need to have space and facilities. And until you have policies that create that or make that, or funding that create that or make that, you probably didn't do a lot of nice collaboration, a lot of talking, all that kind of stuff. But you need to start creating those spaces, and you need to have the pipeline. By the way, I do, you know, I'm on a Eastern Oregon University Board of Trustees, and people can talk pathway and pipeline all they want. You got to get students that want to be teachers. There's a lot of little things, and then they create the class, then they the professor, then they create the, you know, the degree or the certificate. There's a lot to it, and it's that, to me, that infrastructure part is a big deal, and I don't think that's strong enough.
I think a collaborative opportunity is during the legislative session. I think what happens is agencies tend to get uber focused on their agency request budget or the governor's budget related to their agency. But what if this group came up with 5 or 6 policy option packages across the agencies and had a package, like we had the same slide and a slide deck, et cetera. Anyway, I think that would be fun.
That would be static.
It would be static. It would blow people's minds, so they would just say yes.
So in terms of collaboration, my thoughts, what if everybody who works with children and families had at least some foundational training that they share? And Trauma Informed Oregon is a underutilized resource in the state. They're developing modules on trauma informed practices, etc. But wouldn't it be incredible if everybody in early child education, everybody at P12, everybody for DHS, everybody for OHA, everybody, all the navigators we have, what do they all have that kind of foundational information to work with?
Colt, do you want to chime in now?
Sure. Yeah, I actually do have 2 for this one, but I'll make them quick. One was brought up earlier. The Educator Advancement Council does have a legislative charge related also to supporting the early childhood workforce and developing it and diversifying it. And HEC is at that table already. And ELD's own Andy Bells Molnar is the chair of the Educator Advancement Council now. So you have a really strong and powerful connection there already. And I do think just as we think about how we're all collaborating as agencies, that might be one to explore further as we move forward. And then my second one actually relates a lot to what Peter just said. And I think of it as all of the agencies right now are working really hard on culturally responsive practices through their engagement and understanding how they work with whoever their clients are. And a lot of us share families as clients. And we are working on trauma-informed practices or social emotional learning supports that are culturally responsive. And I think there's a lot of space for us to collaborate and align around that work.
So 2 quick things. I think one, perhaps this is as the freshman of the group, having a better understanding, some clear definition of collaboration and to be explicit on what our needs are of the collaboration. So it's great to talk. I think it's great to talk. And what's the end game? What are the actual like explicit needs that would be one thing that I would highly, highly advocate for. And then I think the other piece, which is, it was stated earlier, but I think worth restating, which is that I would really appreciate being able to see where we can take, again, all the energy in this room into what the low hanging fruit is. I mean, we don't always have to make a plan to make a plan to make a plan. It'd be great to like see where we think we can agree to move something and just like hit the gas and figure out amongst our structures where we can retool and make things better along the way. But it'd be really great to get explicit around what actually has to be long term, what is actually going to take the time, but also knowing that durable agility across our system, there's some calculated risk and low hanging fruit that I think from my perspective, from a housing perspective, that's worth taking. And I think the stakes are high, and I couldn't think of a better time to take some calculated smart risk based on the information we already know to be true.
Andrea, Pat?
Like Steph, and like I said before, I could answer all of them this way, but again, I'll pick the waiver. Kids 0 to 6 are going to be covered. Half of kids 0 to 6 are born on Medicaid. They will be able to remain continuously covered, by the way, regardless of their citizenship status in Oregon. And now if they are homeless or at risk of homeless, they'll be able to get 6 months of rental assistance as a matter of right, as a Medicaid benefit, not as something discretionary or something like that. Well, think about that at risk of homelessness. I don't know who those people are. We don't have a system in OHA for figuring out who those people are. Steph already talked about the fact that our teams in the development of the waiver have been working together. I think the connections that we're going to need to make, the collaborations we'll need to do to figure out how to effectively get this benefit to the people who need it are going to be a huge opportunity. And we've already shown, I think, between us and ODHS during the pandemic, the power of sort of this critical thing going on that isn't an organizing principle that you can do stuff around. We have a much different relationship between the two agencies today than we did 4 years ago, and I think the waiver has the same power from a positive standpoint as the pandemic did to drive that level of collaboration.
Just say ditto to everything, right? Everybody's already said everything. I love the idea of the Medicaid waiver being a driver of collaboration and collaboration. But I do want to say ditto to what Peter and Colt were both saying, which is that all of the agencies have talked about a focus on equity and culturally appropriate services. All of the agencies have talked about social emotional learning and about how core that is for going forward. And that being, I think, Peter, your point about, and Colt, your point about how that can be a driver of some kind of common workforce development, because everybody needs it. And the fact that is an engine for workforce development.
So I would say collaboration needs to identify the gaps that exist between our systems so that we can begin, whether that gap is more childcare, more teachers, whatever that might be. And then going back to what Sue said, so that we can identify the earliest point of providing support. If we can do that, what Pat brought up around the collaboration between our two agencies is we got beyond all of the bureaucratic teams and just came together and said, how can we do this together? What are the gaps? What's missing? What do we need to do? Who else do we need at the table? So if we can do that here, it's a monumental undertaking because we don't know how to do it. Then maybe we can submit a joint policy option package across several different agencies.
I love that. Well, I mirror what other folks have said about the trauma-informed approach. I think if we can have that be a universal education and training that across all sectors, delivering care to families and kids, that's a huge goal. And I think it dovetails a little bit onto what George said, because we can have the greatest programs in the world, and if families don't feel that those are user-friendly, perhaps because of the manner that they're delivered, they're not going to take advantage of those. And so in order to really move the bar, I think the trauma-informed approach is and that training is really the
think leveraging those diversified families needs to then broader agency goals, so the disproportionate impact of, you know, houseless families, young children, family preservation opportunities. Pat, you mentioned folks at risk of houselessness. Advocates have been saying, how do we get folks at risk of houselessness access to childcare? If I lose childcare, I lose my job, I'll lose my home. So how are we seeing those through lines and really connecting them with some of the broader agency goals we've all established, regardless of if our agency has that birth to 5 focus, but recognizing those through lines across the agencies and leveraging those opportunities.
So you're our last person. Wow. So, so what's going through my mind is we were all talking about collaboration, whether it's the state level, the local level, everything in between. And, you know, I look at RUIAC, and to me, that's a part of our collaborative effort around early childhood habits. Hugely important. I also look at hubs. They aren't all they could be or should be or were intended to be, but they are supposed to have all of these same partners sitting at their governing tables. So, so what's going through my mind is you agency folks, I'm guessing you are in meetings together more than here. Probably understatement. So I think in a way as
You're giving us too much credit.
I'm just guessing for knowing your schedulers. So I'm just wondering, as we try to put a work plan together for the council, how do we tag on to support, feed into all of these other collaboration meetings and conversations that you already are having? Where do we fit? And RUIAC may be part of the answer or helping us get the answer to that. I love Liesel's idea, you know, if the council somehow convene some kind of brainstorming group about POPs for the 2023 session, and we can't wait much longer to do that. But where do we fit? How can you all and us leverage whatever impact the council can have? And that, so I don't know exactly where that collaboration and the opportunity lies, but I really, really would like to explore that. We've talked about collaboration now for a long while, and now we just need to say, okay, so what's it look like? How do we do that?
You know, I think something Fair Boards often says is the work happens at the local level. I think we spend a lot of time talking to each other at the state level, but I would love to see an introduction of the hubs in our case to our district managers. Maybe some of them are sitting on hub boards. I know some are, some don't even know what they are. You know, the community action agencies have a local presence. We each have a different kind of local presence. Sometimes it's our staff, sometimes it's a funded partner, but how do we maybe reintroduce the hubs to their local partners and convene that conversation? And I'd rather use them and make them stronger than start a new local making effort. That's just
yeah. I'll second that.
Speak off that, I think I mentioned this to you earlier, Sue, that when the OHA came out with the SEL metric for kids 0 to 5, our CCOs were so happy to have the hubs help. They said, please help us put this together. So that's an area, you know, that can be some effort with and PHS should be part of that as well.
When I think what we all know is that the hubs have not been resourced well enough to do a quarter of what needs to be done at the local level and what we've talked about. So since our partners are all sitting here, I would just put in a plug that we may need some funding from you in order to resource the hubs well enough so that they can actually be effective. Because the DELF isn't going to be able to do what needs to be done at the local level. Plus, hopefully, they obviously would be benefiting all of our agency partners.
Or funding for whom the hub's opinion matters. I don't know that it's necessary for the hub to have the money, But if I'm spending money or Colt is spending money or Andrea's spending money, and part of that process is you have to engage with the hub and the hub has to do whatever. I think that can be as valuable and maybe easier to pull off
Then,
than us getting money to them and it becoming their money and them doing things with the money. If that makes sense. You follow?
no, but that's okay, everyone else.
So like having a directive with the funding part? Is that where you're?
Yeah, so this, I'm making something up. We're gonna put money into, part of the money for housing process is it needs to be connected to local early learning strategies, and the hub is the one who says yes or no, it's connected. And so you can't have the money until the hub says, yes, it's connected. Which is different than let's send $100 million to the hubs and let them figure out how to spend it on the same thing.
Well, and all I'm saying is the hubs don't have the staff right now to be able to figure that out to give you an answer.
Got it, okay.
The other one, Pat, I think having listened to Sue, unless someone had their hand up, was that, as I was listening to people trying to talk about this earlier today, I think I heard one question, Kate phrased this a few times, I think here, is the hub supposed to be the place that is across all of the sectors to be bringing people in, whether it's the community engagement focus or it's the place people are going to learn what all the sectors are doing. That's a different role from the part you said where you're coming to the hub because they're actually an early childhood education knowledgeable player. And they're expecting to weigh in on something that's clearly part of a bigger vision that OHA has. So that may be raising important questions for people to think about when you're asking, what do we mean by our local entity that we're using to help us all be more collectively responsible and higher impact? Is there might be different ideas around what that is supposed to look like and a different concepts that people even have of where you take the hubs, right, in their growth and development. That's one thing I'm wondering. People might have underlying different assumptions, right, about where that could travel to.
Okay. Any other comments in our last 4 minutes?
I would just say, and I'm just brainstorming a little bit, but if there was a early learning hub and then their task or their mission was to really carry out initiatives around Race of Oregon, and they help to propagate systems, whether it's education, whether it's pathways, whether it's infrastructure development, all these things, if they had people that help to ensure communities were able to grow those things or do those things, work with education agencies and create those things, even care coordination, those types of things would be, to me, interesting, and it would create relevancy to an early learning. It would create more people saying, I'm going to partner with you, I'm going to do things with you.
Yeah, well, so then.
I was struck by something that Andrea was sharing around the low hanging fruit, put the floor on the gas pedal, good metaphors. And you know, we're talking about a 5-year plan here, right? So we are talking about the immediate term. I'm thinking about, you know, rebuilding our childcare industry and getting facilities up and the waivers. These things feel really immediate and urgent. And then there are lots of ideas that I'm going to talk about that are like 20-year, 30-year projects that we're really thinking about here, generational impact, right? And so I wonder if we can somehow demarcate those kinds of things within our plan to make sure that we're saying these are things that we know need to be continuously worked on in future visions and version 3 of the Raise Up Oregon plan. These are things that we'll continue to work on. And there are things that we need to do right now, especially coming out of COVID and just being responsive to our different regions. So I think that's one way to address that. The other thing that I was thinking about is this idea of like a unifying professional development series or sequence. I think I brought this up in the social emotional group. Even with good intentions and good ideas around SEL, I've seen the implementation of the SEL be a perpetuation or a continuation of old, tired ideas that are usually deficit-based around people of color, communities, who are impoverished or, things of that nature. And I'm not saying that I deny or have any qualms with, common core practices, adverse childhood experiences or anything like that, but I have seen the use and the implementation of it be highly deficit based and pretty damaging to certain communities. And just want to put some caution around that. And I don't know if, as a council, we can get granular enough to give enough guidance for that to not happen. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Great, thanks, good point. Cole.
Thanks. I was just thinking back, and George may have this experience as well, that when I was a superintendent in this local school district just a few years ago, the state had created multiple local efforts that are based on collective impact. So the early learning hubs, I sat on that. I sat on the CCO. I sat on the Workforce Partnership Board. I sat on the Regional Achievement Collaborative Board. And at all of these tables, they had sometimes very close to, but not exactly the same goals for the different age groups that they served. And so I think that there is alignment we could think about across those as we reconnect with early learning hubs and these other localized efforts where we have a lot of the same people around the table in multiple meetings, but not fully aligned across them.
Good point, Cole, thanks. Okay, any other comments from anyone as we hit through? Okay, thank you, everybody, for a very rich conversation. Andrea and Colt, thank you for joining us virtually. We appreciate it a lot. And obviously, we have a half-hour break, council members, but then we're back at work at 3:30. So thank you. And agency reps, thanks very much for joining us. And feel free to come back. Nice to see you too. Nice to see Give me time to use this. Yeah. This is the thing that
I couldn't do that.